I'll start with you, Emma. You know, there's lots of kind of calls for the government to do more, emergency budgets. You know, the big buzzword of the day at the moment, or buzzwords plural, is windfall tax. Are the government doing enough?
No, in a word. The government have a few very basic responsibilities. They are to ensure that the population is kept in the best possible way. Now, that doesn't mean mansions and stuffing our mouths full of gold, but it means ensuring that we can all wake up in the morning knowing that we can feed our children and ourselves, and that there is work that we can go to in order to make that happen. Now, that latter part has been quite successful. We now have a scenario for the first time ever where there are fewer job vacancies, fewer people unemployed than there are job vacancies. So why is it that there are more people using food banks than ever before? Well, that's because the economy has been mismanaged drastically, and we are not in a situation whereby we have an economy that works for working people. And that's what we need. We need to have... I'm not saying that we need to have some sort of communist scenario whereby the only jobs are run by the state. There is a space in between where we are now and where we could be, where there is enough government intervention to ensure that what they laughingly call a national living wage is actually something that ordinary people can live on.
Harriet, you was itching then. When she was talking, I could hear that intake of breath, which meant you were poised. What is it?
Well, the reason we are having the cost of living crisis is there's only one reason. That is because Putin invaded Russia. I mean, 3/4 of the price increase has been because of oil and gas prices shooting up, and that's because we handed Putin control over our energy supplies, and we are now paying the price. The other huge thing is the shoot up in food. I mean, chicken and lamb have gone up 10%. Everything is going up because of something very basic, which is fertiliser. And the majority of fertiliser comes from Russia and Ukraine. And last year, fertiliser cost £120 a tonne. It's now costing £1,000 a tonne. That is why we have a cost of living crisis, and not because of anything in particular that the government has done. What the government does about it is another question.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's not quite just as simple as the Russian energy supply. I mean, of course, that is a huge, one of the most dominant contributing factors. But we've also had things like a global lockdown where all of these countries couldn't help themselves, locking themselves down for God knows how long. And then everybody then came out, so we have this lockdown at a similar time. You then pushed huge demand onto a supply kind of side of things, which raised prices. I think you've got a little bit of organisations blatantly profiteering. So I think there's a mixture, a melting pot of things that have come together to create this situation, and there'll be others as well. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the primary cause of inflation is always an increase in the money supply. And that is controlled by the central bank, which is controlled by the government.
What do you mean, quantitative easing? Are you saying that the government's printing too much money?
Printing too much money, and it's exacerbated by the lockdowns. If you shut down large swathes of the economy for a long, indefinite period of time, you stop people working. In fact, you pay people money to stay home and do nothing via furlough money. That leads to a devaluation of the currency. That's what caused it. It's the government intervention that causes inflation to begin with, and it can be exacerbated by other factors. But it's not that store owners and shopkeepers are randomly putting their prices up. What's happening is the value of your pound is decreasing.
I do think, though, that some store owners are just taking the mic a little bit. I still can't get over this. I whinge about this often, £4.50 for a sausage roll the other day. And, OK, it's not about me and my sausage roll, but I looked at this kind of thing and I thought, come on now, I get it, prices have gone up a little bit. But the flaw in my plan was I'd already asked them to heat it up, so I had to pay. I thought, well, I can't get a heated, what am I going to do with this heated sausage roll? I can't give it back. But I do think, actually, that some organisations are taking the mickey a little bit, and a lot of it, they lost a lot of money during the lockdown, so some of them are trying to recoup.
They did. It's important to remember that this 9% figure, it's not a 9% figure for many products that we buy. If you are someone who works in farming or in manufacturing or in timber, the price of some things have gone up 40, 50, 100%. The price of lumber,
index.
The price of metal, the price of foods and so on. So what we are seeing with that 9%, if anything, is an understatement.
So We're talking about some of the causes, because I don't think it is as simple as just blaming the government for everything. And I also think you do. but then what would you say?
Yes.
But what would you say to Harriet's point then? Because Harriet's just made a very good point. You know, she's pointing out quite rightly that we've got a war on in Europe. You've got reliance upon Russian gas. You've got sanctions here, there, and everywhere. Like, that has an impact on inflation as well.
It does. It can exacerbate it, but inflation would happen regardless, and it's been happening regardless. Inflation always happens.
Also, I mean,
No,
if the
but the
government
bank-
are in
the
charge
bank-
of nothing else, they're in charge of how we manage our economy. What we made were several political decisions to ensure that we were not resilient when it came to shocks. Whether that shock was going to be, we didn't know it was going to be a global pandemic. We didn't know it was going to be Putin invading Russia, although we should have seen a lot more of that kind of thing coming down the track, and preparing our economy so that we were resilient enough for it.
Well,
that we had a certain amount of self-reliance in terms of energy, that we weren't, for example, going, oh, we don't really like wind farms, they're not pretty, let's not build wind farms, let's rely on Russian gas instead.
But we as a country don't rely on Russian gas. We get a tiny % of our energy from Russia, so that's not the situation for this country. By the way, Emma, I've just pointed out that one of the contributing factors to this is all of these, what I would now call ridiculous lockdown policies. And the Labour Party, actually, they were one of the ones that wanted us, they would probably, in my view, would still have us locked down today now. And you can't deny that actually
That's
the
a strange
lockdown...
view, Michelle, that isn't actually reflected by any policy
strange,
held
it's
by
quite
the Labour
sensible.
Party.
He kept on saying, every time there was a break, he'd say, no, we must stay locked down.
I mean, I think
totally
we
agree,
need
Michelle.
to balance the fact
What's
that we would
strange
be
about my
in
view?
far greater economic straits if we'd lost more working people to COVID.
Well, excuse me,
the deaths of
people-
working-age people was a problem economically too, as well as a
people
big
were not
moral
dying
and
in
physical
great
problem.
numbers from COVID. So, I mean, this was
I mean, we've
not
all
a
lost
problem.
people that we know, and not all of them were elderly, and not all of them were vulnerable and frail.
Yeah, but my point is that the Labour Party were very, very keen on suppressing the economy for much longer. And you cannot deny that the suppression of the economy has contributed to this.
Of course it has. But this is what I'm saying. If we'd had a more resilient economy that wasn't based on these last-minute chains, on having everything run at absolute bare minimum, then it would have been easier to bounce back from lockdowns.
No, but wait a moment. We've had two. We've had a COVID, which is a once in a generation or even in a century event, followed with only a few days brief pause, followed by a war in Europe, which again is a once in a century event. I mean, you
One we should have seen coming and prepared for better.
You cannot run an economy thinking you're going to have two once in centuries events back to back. I mean, that's just...
And Brexit
Well, we've
That's just
also had
unbelievable.
Brexit, which was a choice. We are choosing not to do anything about climate change, which is going to be yet another once in a century
What are you
event.
talking about? We're not doing anything
No,
about
climate change we are, and also we all know about it. We didn't know about
we also knew that
pandemic.
Russia was it having expansionary thoughts?
I think it's important to say that COVID did not cause this. The response to COVID, the governmental response to COVID is what is causing this economic fallout. This is the cost of lockdowns.
Well,
this was predictable. A lot of people were warning about this.
So you're agreeing with
People
me?
have reviewed it. Absolutely.
But she's saying that as a nonsensical view.
No, I'm not
it's
saying that. I'm saying the nonsensical view is the idea that Labour would still have us locked down, which is frankly nonsense.
Oh, come off it. How do you know?
Because I listen to what they say,
As soon
Michelle.
as we're talking about taking brave, bold steps into reopening the economy, people were desperate to try and attack Boris Johnson, saying that he was putting us at risk. He was this,
I mean,
he was that,
whether
he was
or not
the
we
other.
should have locked down 1 week longer or 1 week shorter, it's
shouldn't
not
have
the
locked down.
same as saying that in May 2022, Labour still want us to be locked down. That's what I'm saying.
Let's move away from the Labour thing, because I think this is conjecture and it can't be
And also,
proven either way.
can I just bring up your point about, that it's not caused by COVID. I mean, at the moment, there's 500 boats trying to unload in Shanghai and load up in Shanghai. So you've got all these parts that we all desperately need in China that we are not being able to get because of the unbelievable lockdowns there.
Zubi.
The lockdowns, not COVID. It's
the government response,
It's the government
Well,
response.
I agree
right?
with that.
Exactly.
I agree. I mean,
that's the Chinese
that's
government
Chinese
that has locked down,
craziness.
right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
So
yeah.
various governments around the world decided to lock down, and people panicking and full of fear decided it was a good idea. I said from day one I thought the lockdowns personally were a terrible idea. I don't think they helped. I thought, and they have caused far more damage than any help they've done. They've even done studies showing that Didn't save lives, and the goal wasn't to. It was to buy time to get in PPE and to so-called flatten the curve, and everyone forgot about that. But this is the cost of it. These are the consequences that now need to be paid. You can't shut down the economy like that and keep putting trillions and trillions into the economy, paying people to stay at home, and think that there's not going to be any downstream repercussion in the future.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.